Hi, and welcome back to Continuing Education, the podcast for homeschooling families with actually useful information. I'm your host, Heidi, and today we're tackling a topic that's both exciting and probably a little intimidating, that's using artificial intelligence in your homeschool. Now, you've probably heard the buzzwords ChatGPT, AI tutors, lesson planning bots, and maybe you've even tried it out yourself. You've hopped on Canva and generated an image using their Media Magic tool. I'll be honest, I was inspired to think more deeply about this topic after reading a Wall Street Journal article titled, How to Make Sure ChatGPT Doesn't Make You Dumber. The title alone really made me laugh because I use ChatGPT every day. But it also raises a serious question, which is how do we use AI in a way that supports learning instead of replacing it? So in today's episode, we're going to talk through the pros and cons of AI in our homeschool, both as a tool for us as parents, but also as something we may actually want to teach our kids to use. Here's the bottom line, though, that I kind of want you to walk away with. It's kind of the TLDR or the whole thing. Whether we're excited about it or not, our kids are stepping into a world shaped by AI, and we need to figure out how to help them use it in healthy, thoughtful, and balanced ways. So let's get into it. The idea of AI in your homeschool can be appealing because it makes our work easier. Do you need a quick worksheet? Done. Need a story about a dragon who teaches multiplication? Done. Want to simplify a science concept in kid-friendly language? Again, done. That's really powerful. It almost feels like magic, like having a teaching assistant who never runs out of ideas and never gets tired. But it's also a little overwhelming, and because AI makes so many things possible. When everything feels possible, it can start to feel like we should be doing more, creating more, curating the absolute perfect learning experience at every single moment. When you're already doing all the other jobs, parents are the curricular planner, the teacher, the field trip coordinator, the cafeteria staff, the janitor. AI promises to help lighten that load, which sounds amazing, but at the same time, it can make us feel really inadequate. Like maybe we're not doing enough if we're not using every tool available, or maybe we're failing if we even need the help in the first place. I feel this a lot. I feel like when AI makes everything possible, it makes me feel inadequate for not creating the most perfect Pinterest-worthy homeschool experience for my kids, or making sure that my lesson plans teach a topic to them in the most perfect way. So before we actually dive into actually using AI and some of the risks and good things, I want to name that tension because it's real. And if you're feeling it like I am, you are definitely not alone. All right, let's talk about the risks. There are, besides my own complicated feelings about AI, whether that's intimidation about figuring out something new or those nagging feelings of inadequacy, there are also very serious and real dangers that AI might pose to our kids, and we need to know about them. The Wall Street Journal article I referenced earlier talks about how our brains are constantly seeking shortcuts. It makes sense though, right? Because humans have a lot of processing to do. So when our brains can dodge difficulties, as the article puts it, it does. We naturally find ways to do that. Here's the concerning part though. Research is showing that as people become more adept at using AI, we're seeing what they call a quiet erosion of our cognitive abilities. And that's the fear that I think that I'm wrestling with as a parent. How do I take something like AI and teach it to my kids while also making sure they're developing the knowledge and skills they actually need? I want them to be knowledgeable enough to use AI effectively, but I don't want it to be something they need to use as a crutch. I want them to be empowered by AI, but not dependent on it. However, I also recognize that AI literacy matters, even if it feels scary. Here's what I think is probably the truth. AI is going to be everywhere. Although I would argue it's probably more accurate to say AI is already everywhere. The kids we're teaching today will graduate into a world where using AI is as normal as using Google is, right? Just something that they pull out and they use all throughout the day without even thinking about it. And that means that giving them exposure now isn't really about novelty or keeping up with trends. It's really about preparation. It's about equipping them for the reality of the world they're going to live in. And if history is any indicator, and I think that it is, those who don't adapt to new technology will quickly fall behind. So if you think about history and technological advances, businesses that didn't adopt computers, they fell behind. Businesses that didn't embrace the internet, they fell behind. Even think about your favorite fast food restaurants. I think about this frequently. The fast food restaurants that have apps, who have invested in technology to create really easy to use apps, like Chick-fil-A, for example, are doing really well. There's always a good line. Those that haven't, maybe like Dairy Queen, are struggling and are falling behind. Employees who resist technological advances often become less desirable in the job market, and they end up underpaid compared to their peers who do adapt. I've said for years that leaving high school with at least a basic knowledge of coding is a requirement for today's youth, and I believe that AI literacy is no different. It's not optional anymore, it's essential. But we face some major risks, and there are risks that we should name and talk about so that we can understand kind of how to address them. There are 4 main ones that I think of when I think of AI. These concerns aren't just vague worries, they're legitimate issues we need to address head on. The first risk is over-reliance. When you use AI, you risk developing an over-reliance on it. And so do your kids. We've all seen how spell checkers can make people lazy spellers. In fact, if you scroll through your social media feed for just 5 minutes, you'll see that even with spell checkers and grammar tools built right in, most people can't type a complete sentence with proper capitalization, punctuation, or spelling. And AI can create that same problem, just on a much bigger scale. If every essay is drafted by ChatGPT, kids will miss out on the muscle-building work of writing. They don't learn how to organize their thoughts, they struggle through their word choices, and they never seem to develop their own voice. And those are skills they absolutely need, not just for school, but for life. The second main risk, I think, are accuracy issues. AI has some very real accuracy issues. I use AI every day in my work, and I can tell you from personal experience, it often makes things up. Now, this was especially rampant in the early days of these tools, and companies since then have made a lot of improvements, but it still happens regularly. AI can give false information. Sometimes they call it AI hallucinations, which are completely wrong answers that it states with total confidence. It will tell you something that sounds completely plausible, and you have no idea that it's making it up until you fact check it. And that's not even taking into account the fact that AI can also be biased. So AI reflects the data that it was trained on, which means it sometimes carries hidden assumptions, cultural blind spots, or perspectives that just don't represent the full truth. It's not neutral just because it's a machine. It actually can have biases or lack some of the ability to kind of reason in a real logical and human way. The third risk is loss of creativity. And here's something that really concerns me as someone who loves to write. If AI is always generating the stories, the project ideas, the creative prompts, when do kids get the chance to flex their own imagination? Creativity isn't something you're just born with or without. It's a skill, and it needs to be practiced and strengthened over time. So if we're constantly outsourcing creative work to AI, kids will lose the opportunity to develop their own original thinking, their own unique ideas, and their own problem-solving approaches. And that doesn't just happen with writing. That also happens with very more concrete skills like math. In fact, as I've kind of done math with my own kid, I've mentioned before, I've never been great at math. I didn't like it when I was a kid, but now that I'm doing math again with my own kid, I am learning to understand and appreciate numbers in a different way. And as we're diving into algebra, for example, I'm realizing that to solve problems in math, you need to be creative. You need to know all the different rules and be able to pick from one to try to solve the problem. If you aren't if you're kind of given the step-by-step or always given the answer, you're losing that skill to be creative, not just in writing, but also in concrete skills like engineering and math. The fourth risk is probably the one that worries me the most, and that's privacy. So many AI platforms save and analyze the inputs that you give them. So whatever data you put into it, the system is keeping track of it. So if you have a kid who uses AI and starts typing in personal details like their full name, where they live, details about their family, maybe it feels like a private and safe space to them. So they tell it, thoughts that they've had or something intimate about themselves. It's possible that you have a platform collecting and learning very intimate details about your child and your family. And it doesn't happen over the course of one conversation where maybe you realize it. It's happening in the course of multiple conversations over time. So maybe in one conversation, you mentioned that, oh, I'm autistic. How can I do this? And it gives you an answer. But then the next conversation, you give it another detail, and it's kind of gathering this information about you, your family, your kids. And here's the thing though, kids don't realize this. They think they're just having a conversation or they're asking a question, and they don't understand they're potentially handing over sensitive data that can be stored indefinitely. So now that we've kind of talked about those 4 risks, before we move on, I just want you to take a minute and ask yourself, which of those risks feels the most concerning in your home? Is it over-reliance? Is it accuracy? Is it creativity? Is it privacy? I think that when you take a minute to kind of think through those things and kind of name them, naming your worries is the first step to setting healthy boundaries if you decide to use AI in your homeschool. Once you know what you're most concerned about, you can be real intentional about addressing those issues. So, for example, when I have privacy concerns, you can set rules around making sure that that is not something that is going to be encountered, right? The same way that, when your kid goes and plays Roblox for the first time and they've got the chat available, we talk about privacy. We say, hey, never say your name. Don't ever say your age. Don't say, where you live or anything about yourself. We talk about those things. And that's the same thing with AI is figure out what concerns you about it. And then when you're going to set those boundaries, you can put rules into place to safeguard against them. So that's the first thing I think that it's important is naming what you're worried about and figuring out the boundaries that you want to set that are going to be healthy. But now let's talk about some of the benefits that AI can offer, because I don't want to just talk about the entire episode, just talking about what's scary or risky. You could probably do that all on your own. AI does have some very powerful benefits, especially in a homeschool setting, because we can be flexible and we can really be creative about how we use AI. It can be especially helpful for parents who are teaching multiple kids at different levels, or if we're trying to explain concepts that we ourselves don't fully understand. I think this frequently when I'm working on science with my kids, and they're getting into the details of biology. That is not my strong point. I'm not a biologist, but AI and I can have a conversation and it can direct me to resources to really be able to explain a concept and better understand it myself. So benefit number 1, it can be personalized and adaptable. So AI can tailor explanations in a way that textbooks just can't. It can adjust its responses almost instantly to match your child's level, their interest, or learning style. So, for example, if your kid doesn't understand fractions, I recognize I use this experience a lot because I had a kid who did not understand fractions, even though I feel like I explained it every way I could think of. However, you could ask AI, explain fractions using Minecraft examples, or you and your kiddo could go play Minecraft and you could say, hey, my kid and I are playing Minecraft and we want to explore fractions. Give us examples of tasks we can do to help us better understand fractions. And then you can kind of dive into that. Suddenly math will click because it's tied to something that your child already loves and understands deeply. Or maybe your kid is obsessed with dinosaurs. You could say, explain how photosynthesis works using a story about dinosaurs. And AI will do it, right? Your child will actually pay attention because the story is about dinosaurs. It's presenting them with information in a way that connects to their world and something they're interested in. The whole premise of this podcast actually was that I wanted to help parents infuse real-life teaching strategies into their homeschools. These are strategies that took me endless hours of reading books, watching videos, and piecing together information. And now that same kind of personalized, tailored guidance is available through AI almost instantly. And that's genuinely powerful when it's used well. Another benefit is it can act as a curiosity companion. So AI can serve as a wonderful companion for your kids when they have endless questions throughout the day. Sadly, I don't know as much as I want my kids to think I do, and I don't have all the answers at my fingertips. And that's where AI can really shine. So your child can ask, why do whales sing? And they can really get into the nitty and gritty of these questions. Or how do rockets work? And again, they can get into the very details of the rockets that they might really want to know about. Or what makes leaves change color? Instead of saying, I don't know, and moving on, you can look it up together using AI. And then, and this is really important, you can fact check what it tells you using a book, a trusted website, or another source. You can just say, hey, AI, can you cite your sources on this one? And this approach will turn curiosity into a shared learning adventure. It shows your kids that not knowing something isn't the end of the conversation, it's just the beginning. And it teaches them the crucial skill of verifying information rather than just accepting the first answer they find. Benefit number 3, I think, is really helpful for kids who kind of get stalled in their thinking. It can act as a creative jumpstart or story generation. So besides just, at the end of the day, your kid wants a bedtime story, and maybe you've run out of creative steam, AI can generate a story right on the fly. Or if you wanted to infuse a little bit of history into that, you could say, write a story about a time-traveling hamster who learns about the American Revolution. I mean, that's not just entertaining. It can sneak in history facts and spark conversations about what really happened and what's fictional in the story. But it can also help with hesitant writers. So I have one kiddo who's really struggles to write for a couple of reasons, but one of them is the fear of committing to something on the paper or really struggling with the creative part. It can give you a starting point where you can brainstorm ideas off of it of what stories to even write about. Or you could say, I want to write about this. Can you give me a sentence stem where I can get started with this story? So no longer are you having to go Google and find some teacher who's put some wonderful resource out on the internet. AI has it at an instant to kind of give you that starting point to help your kiddo write. And if they are a hesitant writer like mine is, it kind of gives them a starting point where they feel a little bit of nudge and promise and confidence to continue writing. And if they get stuck, we could say, hey, AI, so far we're this far in our story. Can you give me 5 ideas of what might be a good place to turn next? Like, don't write it for me. Just give me some ideas to spark my generation, right? So it can kind of help your kiddo, because the goal isn't to make them do everything themselves. The goal is to give them the confidence to do it themselves. So now let's think about, okay, well, how do we integrate this into our world in a healthy way? I like to think that AI literacy is the next essential step after computer literacy. So just as we had to learn how to use search engines responsibly, or how to evaluate whether a website is trustworthy, or how to protect our personal information online, our kids need to know how to interact with AI tools responsibly and thoughtfully. And so AI literacy means teaching them what I believe are 4 key things. The first one is when to use AI. They need to understand which situations call for AI help and which situations require their own thinking and effort. Again, this is kind of where I would turn back to the guide at the beginning, which is that AI should support our learning and not replace our teaching or replace our skills, right? So when can it support me? And when do I need to just dive in and do it on my own because I don't want to replace my own effort? So that's the first one, when to use AI. The second one is how to use AI effectively, learning how to ask good questions, how to give clear prompts, and how to get useful responses rather than garbage answers, right? So when we're wanting to do research for a research project, we might prompt it with something, but then we might also want to ask for it to cite its sources or to pull from information only from government websites or from real studies that have been completed. Giving it good, clear prompts will help us get good information back. So they need to learn how to use AI effectively to support their work and improve their work rather than just it doing it for them and giving them what's typically referred to as AI slop. The third key thing that I think is important is teaching them how to identify AI-generated content. So kids need to recognize when something was created by AI So they're not unwillingly learning from something or spreading false information. So there are, for example, if they're online and they see a picture or a news article about something and the picture just looks off, they need to be able to say, I think that was AI generated, and be able to know what to look for. Like, oh, it has five fingers, but one of the fingers is placed incorrectly or something like that. Like AI can be very difficult to learn. It's something that I myself am learning how to identify myself. But I think it's key that we be able to call it out and help teach it to our kids so they can see when something is AI generated, because we don't want them spreading bad information and we don't want them learning from something that's not maybe accurate. The fourth key thing is how to advocate for when AI is wrong. So we want them to still develop the confidence and critical thinking skills to push back, to question, and to verify when something doesn't seem right. That can be out in the world when they encounter AI, but it also can be to AI itself. We can say, hey, AI, that doesn't sound right. You mentioned a study that said this, but I see something else. And learn how to have that dialogue rather than just kind of accepting the first thing it gives you. These aren't optional skills anymore. I believe they're as fundamental as knowing how to read, write, and do basic math. I think for another time, we'll save specific platforms that maybe you want to or maybe wouldn't want to use. We'll save that for another episode. But I wanted to give you a couple of practical ways that I've used AI. We talked a little bit about them. I'll talk about a couple more before we kind of end things up here. The first way, and I think it's one of the best ways that I use AI, is that I use it as a teaching assistant for checking my work. So for example, I do math with my kiddo every day. And I've mentioned before, I'm not great at math. I always worry that maybe I'm doing it wrong, especially if it's easy. I definitely worry if it's easy that maybe I've done it wrong. So what I do is if we come up with a problem and I'm not 100%, he works the problem on paper and I work the problem on paper. Then I take a picture of my problem and I ask AI to check my answer and confirm I did it correctly. I don't want it to just give me the answer or to tell me I got my answer right. I want it to also confirm the process. Because then when I'm explaining the problem to him, I will know that I did it correctly, right? That I'm explaining it in the right way. So I double check myself. I snap a picture of the problem. I ask it to give me the answer and show me the steps. And then this approach prevents him from getting bad information from me. And it also saves us both the frustration of me realizing halfway through that an explanation that I made was a mistake and that now we have to start over, which is just very confusing. So in this scenario, AI isn't doing the work for him. It's not doing the work for me. And it's not replacing my role as his teacher. It's simply helping me be a better teacher by giving me the confidence that I'm explaining things correctly. The second scenario is kind of letting it act as a brainstorming partner for lesson ideas. We kind of talked about this previously. So some families incorporate AI during the brainstorming stage of a project, not in the writing stages, but just in the brainstorming phase. So give me 5 science project ideas, or I really want to talk about, this science topic. Give me 5 ways that I can in a science paper. Or suggest debate topics about space exploration that would be appropriate for middle schoolers, right? It can kind of generate lists of ideas and act as a brainstorming partner when you need that support. This is actually really similar to how I use AI in my own work. It's kind of like a coworker that you're bouncing ideas off of. I'll say, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you think of that? Or point out some pitfalls to that. And it kind of we can bounce ideas off of each other. And then the third one can be really helpful for executive function support for your neurodivergent kids. So AI can be incredibly helpful for kids who are autistic or have ADHD, especially when it comes to breaking things down into specific or concrete steps. So if you have a kid who struggles with executive function, things like planning or organizing or knowing what to do next, AI can really help them create checklists or to break those big, overwhelming ideas into smaller and more manageable parts. So, for example, if they need to write a really big paper or work on a really big school project, they could ask, break down how to write a research paper, for example, into small steps so I can do it one at a time. Or if your kid gets anxious about new experiences, you could ask AI, what's typically involved in visiting an eye doctor? What will happen from the moment I walk in the door? To kind of give them some structured, literal, step-by-step instructions. AI is a perfect tool for generating those kinds of detailed explanations that you might not think of providing, or you might not have time to write out yourself. AI can also act as a really patient tutor. So this is, it doesn't have to just be an answer machine. It can actually act as a tutor. So rather than asking AI to simply give you the answer to a problem, you can teach your kids to ask it to guide them through the problem. And the difference can be really huge. So they could say, ask me questions to help me figure this out on my own, or give me step-by-step directions, but let me try each step before you show me the next one. Or explain this concept to me in 3 completely different ways. AI can re-explain a tricky math concept in 10 different ways using different examples, different approaches, different metaphors, until something finally clicks in your kiddo's brain. And that's the kind of learning that actually sticks because they've worked through it and they understand it rather than just being handed the answer. The key here in all this is making sure you're teaching the critical skill of fact checking. And this is a non-negotiable in our book. So when I work with my kids in AI, I make sure that they know they can't just take AI answers at face value. We're constantly checking our sources and that they need to fact check everything. This is just a really good skill for life in general right now. You can reinforce this skill in many ways. You can ask the AI to cite its sources. Say, give me 3 sources where I can verify this information, and then we can go look them up and see if the information is true. Or you can make it a family rule that any fact learned from AI has to be confirmed in at least one other place, like a library book or an encyclopedia or a trusted education website, or a news website, or even by asking you to help them verify it. This habit of verification is what I think is one of the most important skills we can teach our kids in the age of instant information. It's not about distrusting information. It's really about being thoughtful and critical consumers of information, no matter where it comes from. So at the end of the day, here's what I keep coming back to, and it's basically what I started this episode with. AI is not going away. The kids we're teaching today will live in a world where AI is normal and ubiquitous as smartphones are in our lives today. Shielding them from it completely, pretending it doesn't exist, or refusing to engage with it. I see a lot of parents doing that. It doesn't prepare them for the reality that they're going to step into as adults. But at the same time, handing it over without guidance, without boundaries, without thoughtful conversations about how to use it well, that's just as risky, but in a completely different way. The real win here, the goal we're aiming for as homeschool parents, is helping our kids use AI in healthy, thoughtful, and balanced ways. Those are the 3 words that I keep coming back to. Let it be a springboard that launches their ideas forward and not as a shortcut that lets them bypass the hard work of actually learning. If we can do that, if we can raise kids who are genuinely curious about the world, who think critically about the information they receive, who can flex their creative muscles regularly, and who are also comfortable in using AI as one tool among many, then we're setting them up for real success in the world they're about to inherit. Before you go, if you enjoyed this conversation today, I'd really appreciate it if you shared this episode with a friend who's also navigating the homeschool journey and wondering how to handle AI. And honestly, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Are you already experimenting with AI in your homeschool? Are you avoiding it altogether for now because you're not quite sure what to do? Or are you somewhere in between, testing the waters but being very cautious? Reach out and let me know. I'm genuinely curious how other families are handling this new territory. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, keep guiding your kids toward a future where they can truly thrive.